Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where yesterday Jaume Collet-Serra, a mid-level director, got his first big picture, and that's Disney's The Jungle Cruise, which of course is going to star Dwayne Johnson. Eventually, his slates, or his dance card, I guess is a more fun metaphor, is pretty full. But the real headline that evolved, naturally, because it's anti-DC, is that, Suicide Squad 2 lost their top choice for a director. Well, he couldn't have been that big of a top choice because they didn't sign him. So I think that Jaume Collet-Serra, to be honest with you, was like the best of a bad group of people that they had to select from. Maybe they're still waiting for Mel Gibson to make up his damn mind when it comes to Suicide Squad 2. They're like, read it again, Mel. Watch it again. Because, that was, of course, Mel Gibson's reason for having pause, and that he didn't feel he was familiar enough with the source material. And so they said, go familiarize yourself. And apparently he's taken his sweet time and also filing lawsuits, as you might have seen, for sabotage. And I think the name of the movie is like Love's Labor's Lost or something. But anyway, Jaume Collet-Serra got his big gig. And, the way the trades shaped the story, they were like, he's an up-and-coming director. He's really proven himself, especially with The Shallows. Pretty darn good movie. That was the shark movie from, I think now at this point, either one summer or two summer. No, I think, it was last summer. And it starred Blake Lively. And the thing cost like nothing to make, and it made a decent amount of money. And it was, I think, very well directed. I'm not saying Jaume Collet-Serra isn't talented, but I have not seen anything in his work to show me that he's someone who could take his career to the next level. I think he's a mid-range director, and maybe that's where he should stay. Hopefully he'll prove me wrong with Disney's Jungle Cruise. If you're curious as to what else he's done, he's basically been Liam Neeson's director. We talk about directors and talent pairing up. Well, he paired up with Liam Neeson. And they not only did a film called Unknown, which was only moderate, but they did Run All Night, which I actually thought was pretty solid. But the best film I think that he made with Liam Neeson was Non-Stop. It was like this thriller on a plane with Julianne Moore as well. And Michelle Dockery from Downton Abbey in a very small role. But that was an excellent movie. And also, interestingly enough, both Non-Stop and The Shallows use a lot of texting quite effectively. So I wonder if they'll text on Jungle Cruise. But I wouldn't cry any tears if I were Warner Brothers for losing this guy. In fact, I'd probably say, thank you, Disney, for helping me make the right decision of not hiring him. I have very little faith in Jungle Cruise. Love the ride. It's based on a ride. They're hoping for another Pirates success, but I personally feel this is going to go the way of Eddie Murphy's The Haunted Mansion. I feel Dwayne Johnson, I think that it's going to take a lot of work to get him back to where he was right after San Andreas. I don't think this is the movie to do it. Maybe Jumanji will be a pleasant surprise. The more I see the trailer, the more, after the initial shock of how, I don't like the creative choices they made, it does elicit some laughs. I think it's going to get killed. I think it's a holiday. Yes, it's a Christmas release. I think that's the stupidest time possible to release a jungle movie. But, hopefully it's not too big of a disaster and he won't be in too bad shape for what they're saying is going to be Indiana Jones on the water. I don't know. I think that's, I love Dwayne Johnson. I even once said he could play Superman potentially if he were going to ever race bend the character, but I just don't see him as Indiana Jones. I don't see the correlation between the two. And I have very little faith in that movie. Now, a lot of you asked me and you said, well, who should direct Suicide Squad 2, Grace, if Jaume Collet-Serra is taken? Well, if Mel Gibson doesn't want it, and I can see the pros and cons of his involvement, it's who I said when I reviewed John Wick Chapter 2, Chad Stahelski. Duh, it's a pretty obvious choice, but his dance card's getting pretty full, although I think he'd clear up some dances for Suicide Squad 2. He's in the Keanu Reeves business, interestingly enough. Keanu's decided to pair with him. Good choice, Keanu. They're not only set to make John Wick Chapter 3 together, but they are making a television series together called Rain, where Keanu plays another assassin, but this time he specializes in making it look like a natural accident. I think that sounds pretty good. I just liked John Wick 2 so much, and even though it dragged a little bit in the third act, I thought it was so clever visually, and I thought that it pushed the edge of the envelope so much that I really had a lot of respect for that. So, and he's also, of course, supposed to do a new Highlander movie, but that's, I think, not close to being anything that's a reality. So I think he could squeeze in Suicide Squad 2, and I think he would just do a fantastic job. So that's who they should hire, and they really dodged a bullet with Jaume Collet-Serra, with all due respect to him. All right, so that's the first story of the day. Now, the second story of the day is that another weird movie is coming together, and that's Bumblebee. This new, Transformers, the writer's room stumbled out of the gate. I would say in some ways fell flat on its face when you hear about the box office in just a moment with Transformers 5. But now they're going to try and do a spin-off movie, their first, Bumblebee, and that's coming together with both a release date now finally nailed down and a cast. So the release date is December 21st, 2018. Weird release date. It's going to go up against Aquaman. Never bet against James Wan. I think that's just absolutely ridiculous. And also, just 5 days later, Mary Poppins Returns will open, which is another family movie. So I don't know where there's space for Bumblebee in here. I think it's absolutely ridiculous, especially after Transformers The Last Night, aka Transformers 5. This movie is up to $568.9 million worldwide, whereas the two previous entries both joined the $1 billion club. So it's about half. That's really bad. So I think that Transformers has lost a lot of faith, not only domestically, but now it looks like internationally. And so I don't know where that leaves Bumblebee. Travis Knight's going to have to work really hard here. Now, Travis Knight, of course, the son of Phil Knight, who owns Nike, who personally funded Leica. So Travis Knight is his son. It's just like the Ellisons. Skydance is David Ellison, and Annapurna Pictures is Megan Ellison, and their father is Larry Ellison, who has Oracle. So these guys are giving their kids blank checkbooks and saying, go make movies. And it's turning out, pretty good, I think. But Leica, I think at this point, Travis Knight's like, I ain't ever getting an Oscar for stop motion. Forget it. I'm going to go make this live action movie. So he's going to, and you can see his fingerprints on this to some degree. Haley Steinfeld will star. And then Jorge Lindborg Jr. is the male lead. Apparently he was in Spider-Man Homecoming. I've looked at his photo. I've seen him in the movie twice now. I don't remember where in the movie he is. But he's also on the upcoming Alita Battle Angel for Robert Rodriguez, which James Cameron is also producing. So he's a rising talent, and this is a pretty good gig for him. Although just tell that to Jack Raynor, who's like, I was in Transformers 4 and my career went nowhere. But anyway, the big person who they signed on yesterday was John Cena. Whose acting career is moving forward. Good for him. He's trying to be like Dwayne Johnson, right? And remember Ronda Rousey, her agents were like, you could be Dwayne Johnson, the female Dwayne Johnson. Well, that didn't work out, and her mixed martial arts career actually didn't work out either. She really imploded. But John Cena, he's continuing to move forward slowly but surely, and this is his biggest gig that he's landed yet. And it's huge for him. He got a lot of headlines yesterday. I'm sure he and his management team are absolutely thrilled, as they should be. But from a creative perspective, as much as I like John Cena, he seems so much like Mark Wahlberg. I can't help but think that maybe he's supposed to be related to Mark Wahlberg's character in the later movies. It just is an odd choice to me to choose, which basically, I was like, is John Cena he sounds like the cheap Jack Black. And now I'm like, well, is he the cheap Mark Wahlberg? I guess the consistency here is John Cena is cheap talent. Not for long. If this keeps up, he'll get his payday up there. But I don't know. I feel like maybe this film, they did bring the budget down. That would be, I think, in their best interest, considering the diminishing returns at the box office. But I don't know. This seems really mixed to me, and I certainly wouldn't release it in such a competitive corridor, holiday 2018. This to me seems like an August or maybe like spring movie where you're like, there's nothing really out. Why not see Bumblebee? Let's see how a trailer looks. All right, so anyway, this kind of plays into the viewer question, so we'll kind of revisit that at the end of the episode. Now, the third story of the day is a number of you sent me this article from the LA Times about Netflix and the fact that they are $20 billion with a B dollars in debt. And everyone's starting to be like, oh, is the foundation crumbling? Is Netflix have a huge speed bump up ahead? And I'm not sure. So let's talk about why they have $20 billion in debt, because they have tremendous revenue, right? They're spending a lot of money. But anyway, what they're spending it on is new headquarters. Apparently they have a snazzy new building in Los Angeles, 14 stories. That's pretty tall for LA. For instance, the CAA building in the Century City is called the Death Star because it's so big and just it's like all like gray glass. I think that's pretty hilarious. All right, so anyway, I wonder what snazzy nickname Netflix's building will get. So anyway, for rent? No, okay. So anyway, they're spending it not only on new digs, but also, of course, original content, because they don't want to be reliant on outside content. Now, that's, of course, how Netflix was so successful. They were the first to really understand not only, the mail order business for DVDs and Blu-rays, but then eventually streaming. They were at the head of the curve. But the problem is that once everybody else figured out that's where the money was, they started to pull their content from Netflix. You'll notice that Netflix actually doesn't have a lot of content that you can watch outside of their original shows on their platform. They have a pretty good deal with Disney, but not all the Disney stuff is on there. So they're in like kind of a weird space, and that's why they push their original content so much when you go onto the homepage, whenever you're in the app. So not only do they need a lot of original content that's exclusive to Netflix, but a lot of it is stuff they don't make. Instead, they're licensing it from other companies, and that costs them a lot of money. For instance, Netflix doesn't own the Marvel shows. Marvel owns those, and they give the exclusive streaming rights to Netflix for a lot of money. And the analysis is that those rates might even go up as streaming becomes more competitive. Because once those contracts are up, another service could come in and say, I'm going to offer you a better deal, and Netflix would have to rebid. It's kind of like Bond might leave Sony for Warner Brothers. It's the same situation. Sony doesn't own Bond; they distribute it, and so Netflix distributes these originals. Now, the other interesting thing in the article was that HBO, which of course is Netflix's main competition at this point, even now with all their prestigious original programming over there, more than half of the content consumed by subscribers is apparently from licensed partners, right? So sometimes, I don't know about you, but I'll go on HBO and I'll try and find a movie and I'm like, these are some really weird, random old movies. Who's watching these? Apparently a ton of people. It's hard for me because I see most movies in theaters, so I don't really go. For me, I'm interested when it comes to streaming a film. It's usually a classic, and Netflix and HBO both have horrible classic selections. I usually have to get it on iTunes or Turner Classic Movies. So, but a lot of people apparently are watching HBO third-party content, more than half of what's watched on the network. So that's amazing. And HBO, of course, isn't spending anywhere near what Netflix is. But Netflix is trying to close the gap between the two of them very quickly, whereas HBO has had decades to become HBO. But Netflix, of course, has been doing this at a breakneck speed. Will they break their neck when they stumble on this $20 billion in debt? I don't know. I think there's going to come a time where they're going to have to dial back on the spending. I don't think this greenlighting anything that comes across their desk, as long as name talent is attached, era will last forever. But that kind of makes me sad in some ways, because some of the stuff that they're doing is like the best stuff on TV, like Ozark. I've been talking about Ozark. I'm probably going to finish it tonight. I'm very excited. But would that ever exist anywhere else? And I think that part of the reason that Netflix has such great content is because they just greenlight everything. I don't think they have particularly brilliant, development executives. I think it's luck, and I think when you greenlight so much, of course, the odds are that some of it's going to be pretty darn good. And also, since you're not rating people in creatively, and you have talented people working like Bill Dubuque and Jason Bateman, who are the people who made Ozark, Bill Dubuque being the screenwriter on The Accountant, you're going to get great stuff, right? Although, obviously the ideal situation, as we've discussed before, is that you have executives who do help, and then you have even the best content, right? But anyway, I think Netflix is kind of like in a good space. And so I'm nervous that if they start dialing back on what they're willing to spend, some of these great shows won't get picked, because that's just the nature of executives. I think a lot of times executives aren't consumers of this content themselves, so that's why they don't greenlight the best stuff sometimes. Also, I wish they'd spend some of this money on advertising. Like there's a lot of stuff that goes totally under the radar, and Netflix actually leaves it up to their viewers. Like we're all promoting Ozark, a lot of us, and then so many people really worked hard to promote 13 Reasons Why. Netflix does very little. They're like, you do it. I gave you great content. You want to do something nice for me? Tell your friends to watch it. So I don't think that's the best advertisement model, and I wish they would work a little bit harder. But they're like, no, we're spending money on awards campaigns, and then also, of course, Okja, which I hope does really well. It deserves to, and this content. And also, I do think they need to release their stuff theatrically when it comes to movies. I think that's something they're just going to have to get over. So I think that if there's any problem, it might end up having a financial problem. And I think Netflix is too big to fail at this point and has too much good stuff on it. I think they might just adjust their business model. I think people in Hollywood won't always be able to go there for an easy green light. And I think that there will come a day when not everything, well, Netflix is not the mecca it is now for interesting content because they're going to, close the floodgates, so to speak. But enjoy it while it lasts. And I don't think Netflix is like going to go out of business or anything. I think the more interesting thing is who the heck lent them $20 billion, right? Business. This is why we keep having problems, because there's like no regulation or responsibility. But I guess the U.S. is in a lot of debt itself as well. That's the way the world works. If someone will write you the check and not call it in, you can't blame the person for taking it. All right, it's not like a person owes this much money. All right, so the third story of the day. The viewer question comes from, that's so like economically serious. Okay, so the viewer question comes from Rosanna McGurk. And Rosanna had a great question, and it's very timely because it's about the Dark Tower, which of course opens on Friday. So Rosanna says, "Hi Grace, inspired by the Dark Tower, my viewer question would be, what do you think are the warning signs of a movie in distress? Reshoots, no press screening, lackluster promotion? Hope you answer." Great question, Rosanna. Love it. All right, so I think there are a couple of things, but we're going to use the Dark Tower as the example. Great choice. And I think Bumblebee, okay, so the first thing, like I said, Bumblebee ties into this. The first thing is, what are your immediate impressions as the project starts to come together, right? Are you like excited, or are you like, I don't know. Like with Bumblebee, you're like, seems a little low rent, Paramount, but let's see what happens. With the Dark Tower, well, everybody was excited for Idris Elba to get this opportunity. And everyone's like, oh, Matthew McConaughey is the devil, or whatever the Man in Black is. That's pretty cool. But when they had the director, Nikolai Arcel, a Danish director, that kind of, I think, really hurt the momentum, because people are like, I don't know anything about that guy, and like nobody really saw A Royal Affair. That movie put Alicia Vikander on Hollywood's radar, but look how long she's been on Hollywood's radar. That was back in 2012. What's this guy been doing, right? And I don't think anybody was like, oh, have you seen A Royal Affair? It's so well directed. They were like, oh, this new actress came up in A Royal Affair. That's the only reason that you should watch it. It was, I might have even won Best Picture Foreign Picture now that I think about it, but it was certainly nominated. But all it did was really give Alicia Vikander a career. Also, I'm very concerned because this is the director apparently for Fables. I hope that they get rid of him. But anyway, I think that really hurt it right out of the gate, that you were like, I'm not that excited about that directing choice. Then the next stage to really make an impression with the audience and the press is set photos and official photos, right? There's always leaks. Like, look how much that helped Suicide Squad, right? When the photos came out of Suicide Squad filming in Canada, that was like guaranteed hit right there because it was just so amazing. Remember we had Suicide Squad Mondays? Every Monday, a new batch of photos would leak, and it was spectacular. Especially because they revealed some of that amazing makeup work that they were doing on Harley and the Joker. And then, of course, they released official photos, and that also worked to Suicide Squad's advantage. It certainly got people talking when they released that first look at the Joker, and everyone was like, that can't be real, and it was real. It was fun. And then they had those theories that it was Jason Todd because there's some holes in him. They were like, oh, it's the same guy. It was really good. It gave people a lot to work with. And I think that because of the creative choices that the director did make, I think that the set photos and the official photos and the posters and the trailers for the Dark Tower aren't particularly exciting. They just seem a little bit like TV. They're very cold. For instance, the cover for the Dark Tower comic book, I think, is far more interesting than anything I've seen from the movie. Just that standalone cover. So I think that he really dropped the ball visually. But then the next round is trailers. The trailers make people excited. And I think the trailers for the Dark Tower not only had the same cold, not special quality that the photos had, but, they didn't really do a good job explaining the story. It still became, I think this movie is still, Idris Elba has race-bended an important Stephen King lead character. That's all this movie still is. And that's because I think they've done a very poor job setting the stage and why you should care about it, right? I don't know if they should go as far as Ready Player One, which was called Steven Spielberg, I think this is hilarious, a cinematic game changer. I was like, you can't call yourself a cinematic game changer. What? But, I think that they should have been like Stephen King's like opus, this many books have been based on this. I don't think they did that in the trailers, and I think that was a mistake. Then, speaking of this being an opus and having multiple books, It's only 95 minutes. I think when that running time came out, that was a really bad sign. I think that was like, get them in and out. They're not going to want to stay. I mean, a movie like this should be like supposed to be world building and, you know, starting up mythology for what should be a series. How can it not be 2 hours? So 95 minutes, which is an hour and 35 minutes, is really bad. That's like very bad. And then, of course, I agree. It's not they are having press screenings. They're having the last possible minute. Although sometimes I think they do that defensively now if they think people aren't being fair to a movie. But still, usually press screenings are held the Monday or Tuesday prior to release. To have it on Wednesday night is really cutting it close. And also they don't want any buzz even, because sometimes they have them a little bit earlier and then they just have an embargo which is close to the release date. But to actually not have the physical press screening until right before the film's release, I think shows a real lack of confidence. And so that's not good either. Usually a movie like this should be shown to some members of the press a month out for the junket, or, you know, also you get some of the people who are like Variety, Hollywood Reporter. They usually show them to them way in advance so they can start to maybe build some buzz, right? Or at least scenes, something. You know, they haven't really done anything to promote The Dark Tower. So that's how a movie's image starts to take shape. So very interesting question, Rosanna. Love it. I'd be curious for you guys down below. How do you feel about movies, and how do you start to form your opinion? You know, and at what point is it reach the point of no return? I don't feel that's ever the case. I think you can all, you know, I don't know. I think once they showed Doomsday for Batman v Superman, there was no coming back from that for most people, unfortunately. You know, that just totally changed the conversation about that film. It's really kind of interesting, actually, and tragic. But I'm curious to hear how you view a movie taking shape and form your own opinions. So write down below what you think of Rosanna's viewer question, and also your thoughts about The Dark Tower and what point you got nervous about it, if you ever had any faith in it. Also your thoughts on today's 3 top stories, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and of course, any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.